Hello everyone and welcome to the Cisco collaboration group, and I thank you everyone for joining this group and liking these videos that I have been sharing my contents. So today we are gonna have a look at the provisioning part that I did last time, and we will be adding the partition into the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database using Postman and SOAP-UI client via the SOAP API. So quickly, without wasting any time, let's get started. So let's just first log into the Cisco Unified Communications Manager admin page. Okay, then let's just first download the WSDL web services description language file that is needed with the SOAPUI client. So you could go to application, plugins, and search for something called as AXL toolkit inside the plugins. So just download this first one. This is Cisco AXL toolkit. It consists of different files, and this is the file which will help the third-party software companies to create their applications that they can use to create, read, update and delete the objects inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager publisher. So basically, you can see the description here, what it says. It says it contains some Java-based libraries and that are using SOAP over HTTPS to send and receive the AXL requests and responses. So you need to uh, install this toolkit on the developer workstations basically, and then you can make use of the AXL SOAP over HTTPS to send the requests and get the responses. So let's just save this toolkit. It's getting saved on my default. So it's downloaded here, and then you can just extract. And once it's extracted, you can just open the schema folder, and inside this schema folder you have something called as current folder, and inside this current folder you have uh, different files. So the first one is the WSDL file that we will upload on the SOAPUI client so that the client can see what kind of requests can be sent and what kind of responses can we get for the APIs or the objects, or let's say for example, if you have to create a CSS, so what kind of operations can you perform, so that which kind of web service can you use. So we will just see now. So let me open the SOAP UI client. So you could just download this SOAP UI client directly from the internet. I'm not going to show you how can you download this SOAP UI client. So this is the SOAP UI client that we will use today to send the new request and to receive the responses. Before this, there will be something a new. When you open the SOAP UI, there will be a new window like this. Endpoint Explorer. You could just close this because we are not using the REST method to send a request or receive responses. So we are not using a REST API. We are using the AXL, so SOAP API over HTTP, HTTPS. So you can just say, okay, new SOAP project. You can give any name. So I will say provisioning 1, and then it says, okay, what is the web services description language file? So we will just open the or upload the WSDL file that we just downloaded, tab, and then schema, and then current, and then the WSDL file that we have downloaded from the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. Make sure that you check the create sample requests for all operation, that's being checked, because that's very important when you have to send some requests. So it will create a sample request, and then we could modify those requests. So now it will try to load the WSDL file from the source location that we have defined. And now on the left side, you see that it has interpreted the WSDL file, and then now it says, okay, these are the operations that you could perform. These are the web services that are possible, or requests that are possible, using the WSDL file that is being provided by the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. So these are the objects along with the operation types. So let's say if we have to search for add CSS, so let me make it a little bit better, bigger. What is this? Oh, sorry, I can't show you the whole. Oh, sorry. Okay, so can I zoom it? No, okay. All right, but I think you guys could see here, I'm just trying to search for add CSS or add route partition. Okay, so here you see that there is a possibility to create a route partition. So we will just start with creating a route partition, because if you want to create uh, so if you want to create okay, so if you want to create a phone, so what are the important things that you would need? You would need something called as the MAC address. You would need something called as the uh, device, so I will say directory number, and then you will need the device type. Then you will need something called as device security profiles, and whatnot, device pools. But there are a lot of things that you can keep it as default. For example, the things that I'm marking as asterisk can be left as default. So device pool can be left as default just for our lab, but in productions you will have to select one of the device pools. uh, Security profile, you can leave it as default, but it is mandatory to select during the configuration. But when we run it via the API, you can say keep it as default, so it will use a non-secure profile. So you will have to define a device type, whether it's a Cisco Unified Client Services framework, or it's a Cisco 8851 model, or whatever model it is. So it's important. You will need a directory number, because until and unless you have a directory number on a phone, the phone will not register. Okay, and you will need an alphanumeric MAC address of the device, for the device. Okay, so what do you need for partition? Sorry, for a directory number. For a directory number, you would need something called as partition. and something called as a CSS. So basically you could also leave this as default in your lab, but we will today see how you could create a simple partition and then how you could assign this partition to a CSS using the SOAPUI application or the client. Okay. So when you go to the SOAPUI, just click on this plus sign, it will expand, and then click on request one so that it will show you what the SOAP request would look like. So this is how the SOAP request would look like. I think I can expand it. I hope so. Let me see if I can expand it a little bit. Okay, so basically now you see the request, and in the request you see that the first line, as I told you last in my last video, it starts with SOAP env. SOAP env is a very important line because it says, okay, it's a SOAP envelope, and then it defines where the schema is, the URL, and then the version. So it's communicating with Cisco Unified Communications Manager 12.5. All right. The next line, so it's in the format of XML. You see, it's an XML, normal XML format that you will see with different tags like SOAP env header, route partition. So these are the tags. So these are the tags that Cisco Unified Communications Manager support. So this is the tag that it has been interpreted from the WSDL file. you know so it's not really that it's interpreted from the WSDL file, but yeah, you can say that it's interpreted from the WSDL file that we received from the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. Okay, so the lines that you see here, so the lines like description, for example, it's the description of the partition, and the line above that, it says it's an optional. So that means they have commented out this line. That means the line next to optional is optional, so you can remove it, but we'll not remove it. We'll put a description and we'll just create a partition. So I've just removed the commented out line because we do not need that line, and then we say okay. You see, for creating a route partition, a name is very important. It's mandatory because there was no optional line above this line, so just name it, let's say provisioning PT or provisioning partition. Okay, or and then description, you will say uh, provisioning via SOAP UI. I'm just giving any description, so you can add any description which is meaningful. For me, it looks meaningful because I just wanted to see in this Cisco Unified Communications Manager if it really shows this partition is created or not, so that I can, because it could be that I have certain other partitions. So then it has something called as time scheduled name. It's only when you have time of day routing configured on CUCM, and this is optional, so you could remove it. Uh, Time zone, if you want to use it, it's also the same thing. When you have this scheduled calling things configured inside your Cisco Unified Communications Manager, and yeah, you could just remove whatever is optional. So I've removed these things, you know and then I just make it a little bit uh, better in when it looks. So you see, so this is how the request would look like. So you see, it's an HTTPS request, and then it says CCM server name. So the CCM server name I'm putting now here, the IP address of the CUCM publisher. So it has always to be a CUCM publisher because the database, the right database copy is, sorry, the right database is on Cisco Unified Communications Manager publisher. Basically, the user should have, the application user should have AXL API access rights, you know. So yeah, so this, my administrator user has the standard AXL API access role assigned. So I'll just use, or I can create one access control group, and I will name this as uh, API user. I will then just go to assign role to the access control group. And then I will click on assign role to group. And then just search for the name contains AXL. So you can create two users, the one is standard AXL API access so that, people can write into that database, call manager database, or the read-only access. So you could just read the data from the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database. So it will not allow them to write into the database when you select read-only. So I'll just say add selected, save. So now you see that the update is successful. The application user is created, or the access control group is created. You can go again to our application user. Now you can create an application user, and then for example, I will say API user, and then Cisco 12345, Cisco 12345, whatever it is. I'm just telling you the guys the password because this session is just gonna expire in 1 hour, so it's okay. So I'm just search for this API user that I created. So here is the API user that we created, and then we just add it into the access control group for this application user. Now this user has the standard AXL API access, and then we can use this user for the SOAPUI requests. So let's just click on AXL API binding. This is really important and interesting that you will see here some informations. Now it will try to initialize the XSD definition file. So it will show you also the location from where it received the XSD file. So for example, in my case, it says it found the XSD file at the same location where the WSDL file was, from the same format. So you need to have both the files, so that from the XSD file it gets the object, and from the WSDL objects like add, or whatever it is, add phones, add CSS, or add line group, or add route patterns, add devices. These are the objects that are defined in the XML schema definition .xsd file that I talked to you guys about last time. And from the WSDL, it will get the permissions, right? So here we'll be defining, this is the overview of what is possible, what it is doing. It's binding, what it is binding, the AXL API. And then what's the namespace? It says slash AXL API slash service. And what is the version of the SOAP it's using? It's using SOAP version 1.1. And then it says what are the operations that are possible. These are the operations that it interpreted from the file that it received from the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. you know so all these operations are possible. So it will also say, is it a one-way action or is it both ways action? So here you see that it's not one way, so it can be both ways. So send a request and receive a response, both directions. Okay. And then what are the definitions that he's using? He's using WSDL file and the XST file. So let's now define the username and password and uh, the IP address of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager for sending the HTTPS request. So here you will just under the service endpoints, click on this endpoint field and then just uh, remove this with the IP address or the FQDN of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. In my case, I'll be using just the IP address because I do not have it defined as FQDN. So 10.10.20.1. This is the IP address. And then just double click on username and password and then provide the username and password for the AXL API user that you created. So for now, we set API user and the password Cisco 12345. That's it. And then here you could see the WSDL contents as well that it has interpreted from the WSDL file. For example, what kind of services, so it says it's an AXL API service, and then it shows you what service it is using and then name and binding and all those stuff. So, and then a lot of other things. So I'll not get much into details of all this information. So now it's done. Hopefully when we run the request now, because we have created a user, assigned the user, and then defined a request. This is a SOAP request. So basically this part is very important because this is how the SOAP request looks like in the backend. So it's just for creating a partition. So you can imagine how many concurrent requests a software would be carrying out, just for uh, creating a device, for example. So it's really easy that just with just one click, when you have the front end with just one click, it performs a lot of operations and then you have the result. So now we are trying to add a route partition. Hopefully I'll just click on submit and then it should show with the GUID or object ID or reference point where I say okay, it is created or not. And it says here, when you see there is some alphanumeric characters here or something, so this means that there is an object, and this is an object ID inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database that has been created. So if there is some error message or something, that then you will know, okay, it failed, it couldn't create. So let's see on Cisco Unified Communications Manager if really the partitions are created or not. Partition is created or not, for example. Sorry. So you just go to class of control, partitions, and just find the partition. I think there would be a couple of more partitions or default partitions here, but here you go. You see the provisioning partitions. Provisioning via SOAPUI is the description of the partition that's been created. You see there are rest are all the default things, and this with the asterisk is the important part that you wanted to create using the SOAPUI. So we have successfully created a partition using a SOAPUI. So let's just see now how we could use the same technique and use a Postman application, another tool, to do the same operation. So let's so will not be I'll not uh, invent a new um, code or request. I'll just copy this SOAP envelope request or SOAP request from here to the Postman, and I'll show you how you can perform the same operation using the Postman as well. So this is a Postman application that we'll be using now. So now as we have to write the informations inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager Publisher database, we'll be using an HTTPS request. So basically HTTPS and then 10.10.20.1, and then the port number for the HTTPS that we are using colon 8443 slash AXL slash. So it should be exactly the same location that you have here. For example, we define this location in the SOAPUI as well, so it's the same location. So I'm just showing you the different tools that you can use to do the same requests, and then maybe if interested, you can develop your own front-end application and integrate with the backend. So, or maybe instead of using a CUCM, start using SOAPUI to do some simple requests by building some requests, for example, add phone or add directory number or some things. It's just, I would recommend only doing it for 1 or 2 users at the start and be confident, and then, you know, uh, you can perform confidently going forward. All right, so you're just typing this URL inside the Postman for the post. So post means if you want to write something. So you will see here there are a lot of requests that you can do. So these are the type of requests. So we are using post to send a request to write something on the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database. And then we have to select authorization, and we are using just the basic authorization, and we will just type in the uh, user that we have, API user that we created, application user, and then inside the header we have to define some keys and then their values. So this is a key. So what are we doing? We are performing a SOAP action, and what is the value of this SOAP action is this is the value that you should define. For example, if you go to yeah, here add route partition, I think you could probably see in the binding location about the action. So this is the action that you have to perform. So it's the same exact same thing that you're writing inside the header. So this is the action header, you can say. So basically uh, add route partition. So I will just go to add R. So here it says the action is CUCM :db space ver equals 12.5 add route partition. So you will use the same thing, add route partition. So like this, and then inside the body just copy the contents that have the request that is interpreted by the SOAPUI. If not, then you'll have to use another tool which can interpret the XSD file, or using the XSD file you have to define your own SOAP request then. So simple, just copy, and then paste it inside the raw body content, and the important is the version. You should always check it's 12.5 header, and then there is no header because it's an optional thing, and then body, which is SOAP body, as we talked about it. It's very, very important. It cannot be left blank. And inside the body, we will define another partition, let's say provisioning postman partition. So we know that we have created this using postman, and then we will say provisioning via postman. Now, so once this is done, what you have to do is just click on send, and here you should see the status. It says 200. Okay, that means the information or the object has been created on the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database. And if you see the response inside the body, this is the response that says, okay, this has returned the object ID, which is inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager database. So let's see on Cisco Unified Communications Manager publisher if this partition has been created. And voila, this partition has been created inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager. Once you get used to it, it will be much faster. Instead of uh, in another case, what you have to do is, you have to go to class of control. So here you have to log into the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, go to class of control, go to partition, and then wait for it to load, and then again click on add new, and then define the partition, whatever it is, and then for description, you have to be careful that you write it test, comma, test description, and then it will create a partition, you know. So instead of doing these many clicks, you could just enhance your skills, and then use the DevOps method to just create it um, via your SOAPUI client, or maybe any third-party software that you could try to build on your own. A small one, start with a small one, I would say, and provide it to your level 1 guys and see how their response is. All right. So this is how you could create a partition inside the Cisco Unified Communications Manager very easily using a SOAPUI client or a Postman. In the next video, we will talk about how you create a CSS and then assign this CSS to assign this partition to this CSS. And then in the next uh, or in the same video, we'll also talk about how you would create a device or a phone number and then assign the partition to that phone number. So it's really going to be an interesting module, maybe one or two more modules, so that we would end up creating a device and then the phone, and then at the end I would try to show you guys together how you could create a partition and a phone and CSS together. I hope this was useful to you guys, something new to you guys. I don't know if you have been doing this, but start with something small and then one step at a time, and then probably you will be, learning something new, and then yeah, making life easier. Okay, thank you very much for your times, guys, to watch this. So keep sharing my contents if you think it's useful to other people, and just spread good news if you can. Keep learning, keep spreading knowledge, and I wish you all good luck. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye bye.